but she's all about people's health and wellness as well. And she has dedicated 50 years of her life to research and wanting to know why is it that certain people get certain illnesses and some people don't. So this woman has spent her life before Google. she spent her life in a library. And from that, she was able to write a book. And her book is called The Silent Takeover: How the Body Hijacks the Mind, Overcoming Emotional, Mental, and Addictive Disorders. Now, Jackie originates in Kansas, America. But today we have her all the way live from Northern Ireland, my old Emerald Isle, because I'm Irish. So, Jackie, I would be honored if you could just start at the beginning and tell me, how did you become so fascinated with health? Just over to you.
Thank you, G. Before I begin, let me, first of all, thank you, G and Charlotte, and your lovely team that you're developing there for this invitation. I'm always honored when I'm asked to speak, and I can't always do everything that I want to do. None of us can, but I'm glad this has worked out for me to be able to address the teams this morning. One of the wonderful things about our company is that we can work together. There doesn't ever have to be any spirit of competition. And when it comes to transforming health and transforming lives, it's so important that we work together. So I just love the fact that you all have determined to do this. Yes, I am in Northern Ireland. My son and his family lives here, and my oldest grandchildren, Aiden and Elena, are on spring break this week, and Elena is one of the stars in a local production of Les Miserables. So grandmother came to see her. That's the wonderful thing about having some extra income, so that you can go see your grandchildren. And I just left New York City, where I was with another one of my grandchildren whose school was doing a performance at Carnegie Hall. Now, I have to tell you this before I answer G's question, because I think it's important for those of you who are hitting your 60s and older to understand. In my mid-60s, I would have been unable to do either of these trips. I wouldn't have had the short-term memory that would be possible to go through all the airports, catch the subways, do all the things that I do now. I certainly wouldn't have been able to have 4 days in New York City and then get on a plane, come to Belfast, and then be up and going this morning. It has all to do with what these amazing products can do in your body and in your mind. But to answer your question, G, what happened was I probably have the best health now I've had in my life. I had been a child with health problems before age 10. If you've read my book, you know I had so many childhood diseases, including meningitis. So I was interested in health. Actually, I'm not from Kansas. I grew up in the South. I'm from Georgia. And in the deep South, little girls didn't grow up to be doctors. They grew up to be nurses. So whenever I would say I want to be a doctor, they would be like, honey, you're a girl. Girls become nurses. And so I had a concrete block on my head. But the other field of interest, I'd always been interested in science, always wanted to ask the questions, why? When I was in high school, my biology professor was urging me to major in biology in college and go into research. When I hit college, my college biology teacher was saying the same thing. He was like, Jack, you have an inquisitive mind. You always want to know why and how. And if these things happen, is that going to happen? However, I couldn't see my way through there. I could see my way with my other love, which was English literature. So loving Shakespeare and Chaucer and loving the idea of teaching high school English won. And yet, even in that pursuit, I was more interested in the student than I was in the subject. I'd been trained to teach advanced students. But as I started teaching, I found myself drawn more and more to the struggling students, trying to figure out why they were not as alert in class. Some of them, of course, had difficult family lives. Many of them had economic reasons for this, but I kept thinking there was something else wrong. So that's why, I began to research the role of nutrition and behavior. And as I began trying, back then, no internet, it started me on a lifetime journey. The other thing is I had pretty serious insomnia. If I started reading at night, if there was a plot, I read all night. So I started researching and doing medical studies at night. And so I would have read and read and read until finally I was able to go to sleep. So every night, my husband would be sound asleep and I would be up studying until I could go to sleep. So yeah, that's what happened. So this was hand in glove for me when I had the amazing health changes. And then I had the science background, and I had thousands of pieces of jigsaw puzzles that I wanted to put together. So that's what happened.
So I want to ask, what happened what was the curiosity that you had about children? All I remember in your book, and it's like literally the 2 lines I know off by heart, was that you were in a library, you were reading this paper, and you realized free radicals, and you came running home to your husband in 1985 or something, and you went, "Darling, I know what causes all the pain for children." And he went, "What?" And you went, "Free radicals." And he went, "Is that some kind of band, some pop band?" And so can you share with us, what were you looking for, and what was it that you saw free radicals did to children?
Well, actually, I was in the doctor's office, a research pediatrician's office. I had started taking my children to a pediatrician who in the 80s didn't use antibiotics except as a last resort, where other doctors were using them like M&Ms. And so I had chosen to take my children to him. We had, on several visits, I had asked him questions and so forth. He knew I was a teacher. And so one day he asked me, "What do you think's wrong? Do you think we have better diagnostic tools with ADD, ADHD, and autism? Do you think we have more children with them?" And I said, "We have more children." And he said, "What do you think it is?" And I said, "Dr. Murray, I think there's something wrong in their body that's affecting their mind." And that's what happened. He's the one that taught me about free radicals. And that piece of paper was actually a drawing he had made. And so that's what started it. I started in the early 80s researching free radicals. Every time, no internet, mind you, every time I could find a magazine or something about free radicals, then I would purchase it, I would read it. Of course, I was in the library looking. There just wasn't a lot of information. But then finally there were books that were being published, and I would buy the books. So I had books this thick on free radicals. So when I watched, I also knew that nothing we were doing was changing them significantly. You could measure free radicals in your blood, but they couldn't find anything in a test tube. Antioxidants that you put in your mouth would work in a test tube. A molecule would eliminate one free radical, as you know. But in the human body, it was not being effective. So when I saw the investigative report and I saw the blood test where John Quinones' blood, you could measure the drop in free radicals in his blood, and I saw the results of the study, I knew there wasn't a pill like this in the world, or I would have known about it.
Jackie, can I ask, just before we get on to NRF2 activation, can you explain to people what you started doing when, you just happened to start a private school? Like, it's not something that people do. They don't open a private school and decide that they're going to start testing children to see what foods and what activities, and you were bringing somebody in to test the kids. Or can you explain to us what you were testing And what were your findings that you were working out?
Well, it actually started with an elementary school reading program I had. You see, we were seeing children in elementary school that would be taught to read and they would forget how to read. You don't forget how to read. Or over the summer, they would lose so much. And so I was asked by a local elementary school to initiate some after-school reading tutorials for a number of elementary school students. Eventually, I had 60 in the program. And working with them individually, all of you who know me know that I am a believer. You know that I do my best to follow Christ and to listen because he's so involved in everything that as much as we allow him to be. So as I would pray for these students, I began to have my mind opened to something's wrong here. It's more than just a learning problem and a behavior problem. There's something so off in their bodies. So those are the students that I began taking to Dr. Murray when the parents could afford it, because even though he didn't charge the norm, these tests had to go to research labs because it's not a common test. And so we tested for vitamins, mineral deficiencies, fatty acids, amino acids, neurotransmitters, and gut functions. Way back then, we were testing for gut function. And when you're in the 80s and 90s, people definitely think you're a quack. And so that's what happened. By the time I started my school, I was already deeply involved in the education in the community. Especially with, by then high school students were also coming for tutoring. I had chosen not to teach during those years because my children were small. So by the time my daughter hit the 11th grade of high school, she was, we had been out of the country for a while. Well, we'd actually been in Hawaii for a time for some training for my husband and me. And she had been in a different type of school. And when we came back, she was insistent, Mom, you have to homeschool me or you need to send me to a smaller private school. And she just was like, she was adamant. So I actually started the school because when she announced to her friends that her mother would be homeschooling her, which I was not planning to homeschool her, some mothers started calling saying, Jackie, can you homeschool our children? So I just found out, how do you become legal? How do you become legal? Doing that was to start a private school. So I say, I started the school by accident. But in 3 years, we had 110 and a waiting list. Wow. So I knew we had tapped something in the community that perhaps we could do something about.
Wow. So can I ask you, tell me how you found out about NRF2 activation. I know a chiropractor that you used to go and see gave you a call. Can you share with us what actually happened?
Well, I still see that chiropractor. I'm in touch with her all the time. She's become one of my best friends. However, she will tell you that she sees me more often at meetings than in her office because I'm doing so well. She knew I was working on a book on ADD, ADHD, and autism. The book you mentioned, G, is on mental, emotional, addictive disorders, as you know. But I'm hoping to be finished with my book that's strictly on ADD, ADHD, and autism by the end of the summer. So she knew I was working on it, and quite often she would talk to me about ADHD when I was there. Seeing her in the office for a very bad back, a back that every time I went to my medical doctor, he would say, Mrs. Sheppard, the only help for this back is surgery. And I would say, no, thank you. And he'd say, well, let me write you some prescription for pain. And I would say, no, thank you. I'm from a highly addictive family, and I knew that that would be a one-way street for me. So I was just enduring the pain and seeing my wonderful young chiropractor who was keeping me going. And so one day when she called and said, Mrs. Sheppard, University of Colorado has developed a nutraceutical that's in research at one of the universities for ADD, ADHD, and autism. I have an investigative report on it. Can you come to the office? And so I said, I'm on my way, because I hate, and you can quote me on this, I hate the medications they put children on. They're doorway drugs. They deplete the adrenal glands. You can't put people on amphetamine speed for that many years without consequences in the cells, the cellular metabolism. So that's what happened. I jumped in the car, watched the investigative report, and my concern, during the report, as I'm watching it, I'm thinking, oh, wow, is she going to realize how earth-changing this is? Because we've not been able to really lower free radicals. And if you can lower free radicals, you could affect basically all diseases. What I had not put enough of the pieces of the puzzle together was that it was going to also benefit addiction by changing the glutamate receptor. So I heard about it just the same way that any of you can hear about it, word of mouth. Then I watched the evidence, and I knew I was going to take it. Little did I know that that little 9-minute video was going to change my life so dramatically, because within 2 months, my back pain was gone. And some of you have heard my story within 6 months. So that's why you don't want to quit taking this product. All of our products, they're also amazing. 6 months, my memory was back like it was when I was 40 years old. And even though I didn't have a why, I did then. You're muted.
I'd like to just ask you there, because none of the audience actually know about your memory and what had started happening to you a few months beforehand. So could you share with people what was happening to your memory before?
Well, I had often said that when I blew out the candles on my 60th birthday birthday cake, my memory went with it. Early stage dementia runs in our family, and I had watched it with my little elderly aunts become so severe that they were having to write down that we'd come to see them, or they wouldn't remember we'd even have come to see them. So the first couple of years, from like 60 to 62, I was making senior moment jokes. But by 62 to 65, I knew what was happening. I also knew that none of the medicines are really effective. So I was praying, I was researching, I was saying, Lord, don't let me lose my mind. And I was trying to hide it, as you do from your children and from your friends. But they were beginning to notice it. And actually, they were talking about me behind my back. And they were saying, what's happening with her memory? This is awful, because she used to have such a good mind. And then with one of my friends, when I confided, I went, I'm having a terrible time remembering anything. She was like, well, you're just getting more normal. But that was not the case. I was steadily declining. I knew I was going into a dark tunnel, that there was no light at the end of that tunnel. And by 67, my daughter, who lives near me in Kansas City, would call to make sure I was at home, because I'd had to call her more than once before I got a GPS where I could push go home and say, honey, I'm at the intersection of such and such a street. Do I take a right or left here to go home? And she'd be like, Mother, you take a right. What's wrong with you? You're under too much stress. You're this, you're that. But I knew what it was, I knew that the family curse was there. And so I'm so grateful that changed.
So 6 months on, your back pain. Look, we're not saying we've a miracle pill. So can you explain to the people that are on here that are listening? Because look, there's always the greatest, the next best thing, the next greatest thing. Oh yeah, I can do this, I can do that. Can you maybe explain what NRF2 activation really is? And all it is a switch. Could you maybe explain it to the audience here so we can get a better understanding of what actually Protandim does?
I'll do my best. Because the depth of what NRF2 activation can do is unfolding all the time. You know, as you know, Washington State University said 2 years ago that being able to activate NRF2 in the body is quite possibly the greatest breakthrough in medical history. And many of us who are just normal people, we knew about this first. We're still among a small group of people around the world that know this is possible. What actually happens when I joined the company 2010, they were not even a year into the new business model that the board of directors had chosen as a publicly traded company on NASDAQ. This was a huge decision for them to go word of mouth instead of a corporate model. But we're watching this with Uber, Airbnb. We're watching so many things change, and that's exactly what this is. This is people to people changing health. So we were told then this is a super antioxidant. We know it will be reclassified. We just don't even know ourselves what that classification is going to be. Wasn't until May 2010 when Oxford University published a big paper saying this is a signaling pathway in the body that's the key to health and longevity. Then later that summer, Protandim was named the world's first commercially available NRF2 activator. I'd never heard of such a thing. So I did exactly what's my passion and my hobby. I began researching it, and to tell you the truth, there wasn't a whole lot out there about it. There's tons out there now about it, but it wasn't then. So I was trying to get my head around it. Whatever is this? So the way I explain it, G, is damaged DNA signals, I'm damaged, I'm damaged, I'm damaged. The cells that are designed through the upregulation of survival genes to go over there and repair that damaged DNA have to have a signal. They have to communicate. So the NRF2 activation is the activation of that signaling. It goes in the plasma between the cells. The scientific word is it's a protein transcription factor. But it has to be called into duty. Now, nutraceuticals, phytochemicals in our foods are designed to blow the horn, blow the trumpet, to say, get over there, make the repairs. But if it is not activated, it's just sort of sitting there. The amazing thing is that these 5 herbs at this formula, it's not going to work at another formula. So for those of you who are thinking I can rush out to the health food store, grab all 5 of these, put them in a cup, make a nice cup of tea. By the way, it tastes terrible. But it's not going to do the same thing because this is a synergistic formula. So with a synergistic formula, it fits right into the cell receptors. Cells have little cup-like receptors. And when the nutrients come along, you eat your food, the amino acids then begin to be precursors to your neurotransmitters and so forth. So they're coming along, and here's this little cup on the cell, and it's waiting, going, where are my nutrients coming? And then Protandim hits it, and it goes, ooh, I can take that. And so it goes right in through a little lock and key mechanism, and it goes into what we call the kinase, the kinase cycle or something. And then when it gets in there, that opens up another signaling which sends NRF2 into the DNA of the cell. That's why it is so amazing, is because it can go right into the DNA of the cell. By then, it has activated over 3,000 survival genes. And the survival genes, they have a job, and that's to keep us alive and keep us well. And when they're doing a really good job, they can also make us feel better about life. They can make us happier. So what it is the body's watchdog. So when you take your Protandim, 30 minutes, 3 or 4 hours, it depends on your digestive tract. That little NRF2 activation begins. It does almost like a little computer check in your body. Whoops, this body needs more glutathione. It needs more catalase. It needs more superoxide dismutase. Survival genes do your job. So that's basically what it is.
So I know the big pharmas are getting onto this now, and they're saying, hey, we'll make our own synthetic NRF2 activator. So why not take a synthetic NRF2 activator? What would the harm be?
There's a lot of harm, G. The side effects are significant. A few years ago, the FDA in America approved the world's first drug that activates NRF2 in the body. It's made by a company called Biogen IDEC. The name of the drug is Tecfidera. It is for relapsing multiple sclerosis. It does have, if you read the side effects, I've read the side effects, it has significant side effects. And in addition, it costs between $45,000 and $55,000 a year. So why not take our little pills with no side effects and that cost less than a cup of coffee every day?
I love it. So I trust that you take True Science. Could you spend a few minutes explaining, because you look incredible for 75. So I'm assuming that, but when you started, you just had the one bottle of Protandim and just the number 4 of True Science. Now to us, a lot of people say, oh, it's a nice moisturizing cream. And I'm like, it's a lot more than a moisturizing cream. What you're putting on your face is a healing. These are healing products. So could you maybe explain to the audience here, what True Science, is it just an ordinary Clarins? Oh, I've got my own organic things that I make myself and things. Can you explain what True Science, the skincare really does?
Well, I think 2 things. So let me tell you that one of the reasons for my extraordinary financial success with this company is because my friends saw me. And one of them, when I saw her, I'd seen her 3 or 4 months, and she said, instead of saying, Jackie, how are you? She said, I don't care how much it costs, I want some.
I love it.
Something that it works. Actually, the skin has like a little matrix. So a lot of the things you're putting on your face, once it hits that matrix, it goes, ooh, I don't like this, I'm not going to let it in. But because of the way ours is developed, it goes right in, and that's why it is a transforming process through the years. Is it because it begins to cooperate so well with what the skin needs and has to have, which also is NRF2 activation to keep you from forming wrinkles, dark spots, and so forth. When I go to my class reunions, I'm always accused of everything with my skin. And, people do spend a lot of money on their skin. They do a lot of surgeries and so forth. I've had nothing done. I have to tell you this, from time to time, I have forgotten to take my Protandim. Trust me, I've never forgotten to use my True Science in the 8 years.
That's that woman side of you coming out.
Well, so many times, if I'm traveling and someone's really ill, I've been known to just hand them my bottle. Mm-hmm. And I just cannot not help them right then that day. So I'm like, here's my bottle, start while you're waiting to order yours. And so therefore I may go a day, but if I go 3 days without Protandim, I have brain fog and my back starts hurting. So call it imagination or call it a product that works. All of the True Science line's amazing. You probably know that in clinical trial, it will 100% prevent ingrown hairs. African American men especially have more ingrown hairs than Caucasians. So that's remarkable. That's so they shave with the cleanser. Now, if you get a man using the cleanser, he will never go back to his other shaving latherings. It's so amazing. And then the perfecting lotion, which does activate NRF2 in the skin, which of course that they use afterwards. It does the same thing. It begins to lift, it begins to give luminance, and it begins to cause the skin to be healthy. My husband, who was reluctant, he called it greasy. He wouldn't try it at first because he said it would be greasy girl stuff. However, he's not had to go back to the dermatologist since he started using it 8 years ago, due to what it's been able to do. He was developing a lot of skin cancers and age-related marks. It's amazing.
Wow. And Jackie, can I ask if we could just go back for a few minutes, because I know there's a lot of people that are on this call that have got kids that have got maybe ADHD, ADD, and maybe autism. Do you think that maybe low levels of glutathione, or was any of the testing that you were doing, like, we haven't really spoken about that NRF2 increases the glutathione? Because a lot of people say to me, look, I take my blueberries, I take my antioxidants, you know, so I'm pretty good. I'm really good. I do my good. I've got antioxidants down pat. Can you explain to people how many free radicals we've got in our body, and how how many antioxidants we actually need to produce in our body to actually kill any of the free radicals, and what this may be in association with some of these children's diseases that are happening and other diseases that are happening out there?
Well, it is the central cause. It is the key cause behind all diseases. And that's because when the abnormal cells get stronger than the cells that are designed to prevent them, you have a disease or a disorder. You can't actually eat enough blueberries to do this. A normal person, when they awaken every day, will have over 300 followed by 21 zeros, which when you write that out, you see how huge.
I saw it, 6 trillion, 13, yes. 6 trillion or something, is it?
And the thing is that is if you're not ill. If you're ill, you're going to have more. So a molecule of blueberries will eliminate 1 free radical. So you simply can't eat enough. And a 1.6 pounds of broccoli sprouts will activate your NRF2 pathway. But Dr. McCord explained that this way: it can ring the doorbell. The difference is Protandim rings the doorbell, opens the door, and goes into every room in the house. So that's why you cannot, with any of the fruits and vegetables, even if they're squished up in little tablets and so forth, you can't actually have the same effect as you have with Protandim. With that in mind, with ADD, ADHD, and autism, what's so important is really not what I say. It's what I consider what Dr. Martha Herbert said in the summer of 2011. She is probably the most respected research physician in the United States in the field of ADD, ADHD, and autism. She's at Harvard. She is the one that said she is now convinced that low production of glutathione is the link to ADD, ADHD, and autism. I had been stumbling onto that myself and had come to the conclusion, because we're giving children Protandim, and even though it's very difficult, I think the hardest thing about what we do is not make claims and be able to fully say what we've seen. I was getting such promising responses back from teachers and from their parents. And so I was going, okay, I know they had free radicals. We knew that in a test, they would have high free radicals. A normal child will have barely measurable levels of free radicals, which, by the way, the accumulation of free radicals, for those of you who are listening, is called oxidative stress. So we knew they would have high oxidative stress. We also knew they had low production of antioxidant enzymes, such as glutathione, but we could not use glutathione orally, IVs, injections, or even in lotions to have lasting change, transformational change. We would have short term. So what's it going to do in the body? According to clinical trials, it's going to increase the body's production of the body's own glutathione in vitro by threefold, by 300%. That's why it's a standalone product. There's no way you can do that with blueberries. You can't even do it with taking glutathione. You can't do it. The glutathione has been in use for a long, long time. The research has been there, but it would always, within a few hours or a few days, dissipate. We know now the reason why is the body digests glutathione. You don't want to take glutathione, you want to make glutathione. So that's why when we link glutathione to ADD, ADHD, and autism, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out if they start making more glutathione, their brain can operate better.
Wow. You just explain everything so beautifully. I've learned so much tonight just listening to you. I could sit here all day, but I would like to. I've had a couple of people that are in our group, and I get it. I get what they're saying. They said, look, I know the person through word of mouth that told me, suggested that I take Protandim, said you need to be on it a decade, for a month for every decade you've been on Earth. So I'm 40 and I've done it for 4 months, and it's not really worked. So I want to come off it. I want my money back. I don't believe it's working. Or they're saying it did work for a couple of months and now it's not working now. What would you say to them people?
Well, first of all, I would say if you're a mammal, it's going to work. Now, if you're not a mammal, we don't take responsibility. But it works in all mammals. I would have to say this. I disagree with people who say you should take this for every month represents a decade. I don't think it's optional. I think you should take it every day for the rest of your life. And so when people say, how long should I take this? I say, well, how long do you want the science to work in your body? Now, I do find this, G, sometimes people take it at the same time as they're taking a handful of other supplements. And a lot of times the other supplements are not even, they're not being effective for them, but it is interfering with the synergy of Protandim. And so therefore, a lot of times I'll ask people to shift. Well, I'll say, well, if you're taking this time of the day, shift to another time of day, take it by itself. So we have had people before to say it's not working, but then when they went to the doctor for a blood test, the doctor would make comments on how much their blood tests had improved. And they would then recognize, oh, and then too, with many people, it's subtle. It's so subtle that they're thinking, well, I'm feeling pretty good, pretty good. And when if they stop taking it, I've had them to call and want me to get them a bottle immediately because they realized what was happening. The science, there's 23 clinical trials on PubMed.gov, the most respected medical publishing site in the world. You have to have 3 peer reviews. These are international studies. They're going to be from Australia. They're going to be from everywhere, China, India. And if you have 23 clinical trials on any product on PubMed.gov, you have a scientifically proved product. I would tell you this, I've had phenomenal results. However, if I had had no results, I would still be taking one of these every day of my life because of the science behind it. You cannot feel cholesterol medicine work, can you? You just can't feel it. So a blood test will show the difference. There are other things where you can't feel them. I would say that 85% of the people I work with feel the difference. And sometimes if they're like, well, I'm not feeling any different, I'm like, well, are you getting up to go to the bathroom as often at night? Well, come to think of it, no, I'm not. Are you waking up refreshed? Well, I think I am. Are you sleeping better? Yeah, I actually am sleeping better. Okay, it's working. I think it's a foolish decision not to do everything you can for yourself to have better health. For those of us who are aging, we want to keep our mobility and our memory. So if we have a scientifically proven product, then that, especially one as affordable as this, why not take it? I can't see the rationale. We have people who take an aspirin every day because their doctor said take an aspirin every day. Can they feel the aspirin? Absolutely not. No. They don't feel an aspirin working. So I think it's a little short-sighted.
Okay, I love that answer. And I loved when I actually had a quick chat to you and I said to you, you know, there is going to be this one question, and you said, I'd love to invite them along to my reunion. And I loved it. And you said, and let them see everyone else who was 75 that I went to school with.
Yeah.
Gee, sorry, I just want to interrupt. I'm so sorry, guys. It's just kicked us out of the live video.
Oh.
So I don't know if there's a certain time frame that you're allowed to have it, but it's just kicked us out. Darn. So it's like 45 minutes.
I think we've got one question here that somebody has actually put in. And they've actually said, would you say, and maybe we're not supposed to say it to everyone, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it is a personal question that someone's asking, and this is just your personal opinion, Jackie. We just want to put that out there, that we are not treating or saying anything, treat, cure, prevent, mitigate, nothing. But somebody has asked your opinion. Would you say that the mercury in vaccines causes the oxidative stress in autistic children?
I would say it is one of the #1 causes. The body knows what to do with iron. If you eat something with iron, with zinc, with manganese, with copper, it knows what to do with it. The body cannot use mercury, nor can it excrete it. It has to store it. So those little cell receptors, if that mercury goes right in there, it blocks that receptor. We do know that it can also block the production of a neurotransmitter called tyrosine, in addition to the harmful things that it does. I'm not opposed to us having vaccines. I'm opposed to us using mercury plus 41 other chemicals in those vaccines. I think there's a better way. I also think that, you know, being a child that was born in 1943 who had whooping cough when I was 6 weeks old, who had all 3 kinds of measles, who had chicken pox, and then in college, for heaven's sakes, I had the mumps. Wow. So I'm not so sure that we're on the right path here. Okay. That we're going to do a wholesale, just give a little baby 9 vaccines. So you know, you can quote me, you know, so what if they come and knock at my door to say you shouldn't be saying this? I say to the young mothers, do not feel coerced by your pediatrician. If there's something inside of you that's saying, I do not want these vaccines going into my baby, you are the mother. Mm-hmm. You grab your baby, your pocketbook, and walk out if you have to.
I mean, personally, I vaccinated one child and I got a pit in my gut 3 days before I was doing my other baby. And I went and found out that I could get it done homeopathically. It was going to take 3 years of giving her 100 little drops over a period of 3 years, but she was going to be homeopathically vaccinated better than anything that was going to have been done before. So me personally, that's what I decided to do. Now, one last question. Someone said another thing. Sorry about the vaccines, and then we will cut it. They said, how about aluminium in the vaccines as well? Well, I would have thought it's the same as mercury, is it?
It's true. And we have to be cautious about, and I have a hard time, aluminium, you know, in America we call it aluminum, so my tongue gets all twisted around.
I said it wrong too.
In coming to the UK, I actually have 2, and living in the Midwest, being from Georgia, who knows what English I actually speak. It stores. And it stores in the brain with Alzheimer's, with, we know, lead, aluminum, mercury, and copper are found postmortem in the brains of people who have Alzheimer's. The good news is glutathione can lift because it can bond with those and with those residues that are stored in the brain, but then it's got to have enough catalase. And of course, a protandem, some of you know, will increase production. Clinical trials, 54% of catalase. It has to have these two to get these harmful metals out of the brain. So whether it's a child with autism or a elderly person with Alzheimer's, those blood tests, metabolic tests, are going to look remarkably the same, with heavy metals, with stored chemicals in the body, and so forth.
You've got another question here, and I'm thinking it's only going to help if people are on protandem. Pollyanna's just asked, what do we do if our parents vaccinated us? How do we get rid of the mercury? By taking protandem, is that going to help in some way with that plaque by activating an NRF2 pathway, in your opinion?
Yes, because of the glutathione increase.
Okay.
The glutathione can actually, the other thing you can use is chelation. The other thing, vitamin C, is very healthy for that. Okay. I would say that there was less mercury, perhaps, when I was taking a vaccine as a child than now. All of those vaccines had very short lifespans and had to be refrigerated. They had to be under exact controlled conditions from the time they came from the lab to the child. But by adding mercury and other preservatives, they have a longer life. So that's why I'm saying I'm not opposed to vaccines in general. I think we can find a better way, but I'm also not so sure that, that we aren't just fighting something that is not as bad. I mean, I've had measles. Of course, my mom kept me in a black, dark room with everything covered. I had to stay in bed so that it wouldn't affect my eyesight. All sorts of things. People have for generations had these childhood diseases. I remember every one of them I had, and I'm not so sure they made me weaker. You see, I won't be getting mumps again. If you take the mumps vaccine, you may very well still get the mumps.
Yes.
But we have lifetime immunity. Those of us who had those childhood diseases had lifetime immunity. Before the chickenpox vaccine, if one child broke out in the church nursery with chickenpox, we brought our children to be exposed. Did you hear what I said? We exposed them. Why? To get it over with when they were little.
I have a confession to make with my son. I actually brought him to get that vaccine, the chickenpox, because I had a business and I was working 60 hours a week in a really stressful business of my own, and I couldn't afford for him not to be in childcare. And that's why I ended up quitting and selling my business and moving to the Sunshine Coast and working for myself at home, because that was horrible. I felt really bad, but I get the parents are like, who's going to look after my kids? Who's going to look after? It's 2 weeks. Chickenpox is 2 weeks off work. And when you don't have the families around, it's hard.
But G, had you had a strong and vibrant LifeVantage business at that time, you could have been home with
Absolutely, but I didn't. But my daughter hasn't had it and she doesn't need it. So one last question. Someone's written, when can kids start taking protandem? Because in Australia, it says kids can't take it up under the age of 12. But on the bottle in America, it doesn't say that. So what do you normally suggest?
Well, I say that if you're over 18, everyone should take it unless you have had a transplant. If you're under 18, you should take it if you have ADD, ADHD, autism, or any childhood disease like cerebral palsy or any childhood disease. If I have heard, I don't have a written statement on this, G, that when Harvard did their testing on Duchenne muscular dystrophy, that children as young as 18 months were giving it, and especially children who have a mitochondrial malfunction dysfunction rather, now with the NRF1, which we won't have time to talk about today,
Yeah.
which is amazingly, we've a lot of hope that children who are born with mitochondrial dysfunction may be able to who knows, maybe it'll help, we don't know. So I think that now, I'll also say this, and this is a pretty strong endorsement. All of my grandchildren take it except my little ones. I have 3 that are 8 and younger. They don't take Protandim. All the rest of them take it every day.
Okay. So one last question. And look, we just want to say here, these are Jackie's personal opinions. We cannot say that we can treat, cure, or prevent or mitigate any diseases. All we are saying is when you can maybe get the body to start working naturally and switching on an NRF2 pathway that was switched off, the body starts to heal naturally. It's because of the toxicity that's out there in the world that has created the diseases. Protandim isn't a miracle pill. It's just an activator to get your body doing what it was supposed to do. So that's what I would just like to say here. And there is another question, but I'm going to send that privately to you. And I just want to thank you so much, Jackie. We have taken up so much time. And I just want to honor you and thank you while having this time with your family that you took this time with us. We are forever grateful. And I want to let people know Jackie's coming to Australia. Don't we all want to see Jackie? We want her to come. She's coming, I think. You're hoping to come the end of the year.
Yes, I hope to be there. I'll let you all know. G, you and Charlotte will know when I'm coming. And of course, my own team, that's my team, which is actually my downlines team, but we all claim each other, don't we? Let me add this though, G. Dr. McCord recommended, because I asked him myself, he said 1/3 of a pill for 20 pounds with a child. Okay.
That's good. 1/3 of a pill for 20 pounds. There was one question in the Q&A in here actually that said, can Jackie share her thoughts about how NRF2 activation can potentially benefit anxiety? Well, it's kind of the same thing, isn't it? Like what you've been talking about, like low levels of glutathione and anxiety. Is that your findings that you've researched?
Yes. Glutathione is the master antioxidant. And geneticists are saying now that perhaps as much as half, they say of America, so it's probably going to be many other parts of the world, are genetically predisposed to making too little glutathione. And I think the reason why is our foods can no longer activate that pathway. Wow. We're not eating the foods from the Garden of Eden. We're certainly not eating foods from 100 years ago, not even 50 years ago. So all of the toxicity, herbicides, pesticides, GMOs, plus just processed foods. Many of us eat on the run. You know that. We grab food. It cannot activate this pathway to do its job. Anxiety, I had, even with my short-term memory loss, one of the things that I was noticing was increasing anxiety. But you see, when my body began making more glutathione, it began to be able to start making corrections. Glutathione has been given for brain injuries for a long time, but making glutathione is what makes the greater difference.
Great. Well, Jackie, I just want to thank you on behalf of LiveVantage Australia. I'm so looking forward to you coming out. I can't wait to see you in 4 weeks' time in the Bahamas, where I'm actually going to interview you as a warrior of the world.